The Mercedes S-Class slammed into the concrete barrier at exactly 62 kilometers per hour. Glass exploded inward. Metal screamed. And Chima Adabo, one of Lagos's youngest billionaires, made sure his head hit the deployed airbag at precisely the right angle to sell the performance. The paramedics would find him unconscious. The doctors would find swelling around his optic nerves. And everyone he loved, or thought he loved, would believe him when he woke up 3 days later in total darkness. Chima had spent 6 months planning that crash. 6 months since he noticed the first discrepancy in his company accounts. Small at first, 100,000 naira here, a missing invoice there. Nothing that would alarm most CEOs running a tech empire worth 12 billion naira. But Chima hadn't built Adabo Technologies by ignoring details. He noticed everything. And what he noticed made his blood run cold. Someone close to him was stealing. Someone he trusted was preparing to destroy him. He just didn't know who. So he hired private investigators. They found nothing. He installed hidden cameras in his offices. They revealed nothing. Whoever was betraying him was too careful, too familiar with his systems, too aware of his security protocols. That's when Chima realized the truth. The traitor wasn't just close. The traitor was intimate. Someone who knew his routines, his passwords, his vulnerabilities. Someone who loved him, or pretended to. That's when he decided to die. Not literally, but close enough. He would make himself completely vulnerable, strip away every defense, become helpless. And in that helplessness, his enemies would reveal themselves. They wouldn't be able to resist. A blind billionaire was too perfect a target, too easy a mark. They would come for him, and he would be ready. The car crash was perfect. Chima had hired a stunt coordinator, practiced the angle 17 times in simulation, and paid off the intersection cameras to glitch for exactly 90 seconds. His driver, Emeka, loyal for 15 years, was the only person who knew the truth. Emeka walked away with minor injuries and a bonus worth 5 million naira. Chima woke up in Lagoon Hospital's VIP wing with bandages over his eyes, and his fiancée Adanma weeping beside his bed. "Chima, my love," she sobbed, gripping his hand. "Thank God you're alive. I thought I'd lost you." Chima kept his eyes closed beneath the bandages. He squeezed her hand weakly. "I can't see," he whispered, his voice breaking perfectly. "Adanma, everything is dark. The doctors say it might be permanent." Her sharp intake of breath sounded genuine. Her tears felt real against his hand. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe the woman he'd planned to marry in 3 months wasn't the enemy. Maybe she truly loved him. Then she released his hand and stepped away to make a phone call. Chima's hearing had always been sharp. Now, feigning blindness, he made it sharper. He heard her whisper into her phone. "He's awake. Yes. Blind. Completely. This changes everything. We need to move faster." Chima's heart turned to stone. There it was. Confirmation. His beautiful Adanma, the woman he'd proposed to on a beach in Zanzibar, the woman who wore his grandmother's diamond ring, was the traitor, or one of them. The question was, why? And who else was involved? Over the next 2 weeks, Chima played his role flawlessly. He stumbled through his penthouse apartment, bumping into furniture. He let Adanma guide him everywhere, her hand on his elbow, her voice full of practiced sympathy. He pretended not to notice when she photographed documents in his home office. He pretended not to hear when she made late-night phone calls from his guest bathroom, speaking in urgent whispers about timelines and access codes. But the most crucial part of his plan required someone else, someone he trusted more than anyone, his best friend since university, his chief financial officer, his brother in everything but blood. Ifeanyi Okafor. Ifeanyi arrived at the penthouse on a Tuesday evening, carrying scotch and concern. "Chima, my brother," he said, embracing him carefully. "This is madness. You should be resting, not trying to work." "Sit with me," Chima said, letting Ifeanyi guide him to the leather sofa. "I need to talk to you. Alone." Adanma left reluctantly, shooting Ifeanyi an unreadable look. When the door closed, Chima dropped his voice to barely a whisper. Ifeanyi, I need your help. Something's not right. I think someone is trying to steal from the company. What? Who? Ifeanyi's alarm sounded genuine. I don't know yet, but I need you to watch everything. Every transaction. Every access log. Don't tell anyone. Not even Adanma. Especially not Adanma. Ifeanyi was quiet for a long moment. You suspect her? I suspect everyone except you, Chima lied. Because that was the thing about trust. You never knew who deserved it until you tested them. And Chima was about to test everyone he loved. He would make himself completely vulnerable, stage a wedding, set a trap, and see which rats came scrambling out when he turned on the lights. I'll help you, Ifeanyi promised, gripping his shoulder. Whatever you need, brother. We'll catch whoever's trying to hurt you. Chima smiled in his manufactured darkness. Perfect. The pieces were moving into position. The trap was set. Now he just had to wait for his enemies to walk into it. All of them. Even the ones who called him brother. Adanma Obi had never imagined her life would come to this. Standing in Chima's home office at 2 a.m, photographing his private financial documents with trembling hands, her phone camera clicking softly in the darkness, each photograph felt like a betrayal. Each stolen password felt like a knife twisting in her own heart. But she had no choice. She had never had a choice. 3 months before Chima's accident, Adanma had received a phone call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was cold, smooth, and terrifyingly calm. Miss Obi, my name is Nonso Ekweme. I believe we need to discuss your father's debt. Her father's debt. Those 3 words had haunted Adanma since she was 16 years old. Her father, once a successful importer, had borrowed heavily from the wrong people to save his failing business. When the business collapsed anyway, the debt remained. 42 million naira, an impossible sum. The kind of debt that swallowed families whole. The kind of debt that got people killed. My father is dead, Adanma had replied, her voice shaking. He died 2 years ago. The debt died with him. Nonso's laugh was soft and cruel. Debt never dies, Miss Obi. It transfers. Your mother signed as guarantor. Your younger brother is 18 now. Legal age. Unless this debt is settled, your family will lose everything. Your mother's house, your brother's university education, and possibly their lives. My associates are not patient men. I don't have that kind of money, Adanma whispered. But your fiancé does. Billionaire Chima Adabo. How convenient. Nonso's voice turned sharp. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to help me access his accounts. You're going to photograph every document I request. You're going to provide passwords, security codes, transfer schedules. And when the time is right, you're going to help me take everything he has. I can't. I love him. I won't betray him. Then your mother and brother will die. Slowly, painfully, and you'll watch. Nonso paused. I'll give you 48 hours to decide. Choose carefully, Miss Obi. Love is temporary. Family is forever. Adanma had cried for 2 days straight. She considered telling Chima everything, begging for his help. But Nonso had been clear. Any attempt to involve authorities or tell Chima would result in immediate retaliation. He had people watching her, following her mother, tracking her brother at university. One wrong move, and her family would disappear. So she made her choice. The only choice she could make. She would betray the man she loved to save the family she couldn't lose. And every day since, that choice had been killing her slowly from the inside. Now, with Chima blind and helpless, Nonso had accelerated the timeline. The phone calls came daily. The demands grew more urgent. Photograph this. Copy that. Install this software on his laptop. Adanma did it all, hating herself more with each betrayal, praying Chima would never learn the truth. But Nonso's demands didn't stop at theft. One evening, 3 weeks after the accident, he summoned her to a private meeting at a luxury hotel in Victoria Island. Adanma entered the suite with her heart hammering. Nonso stood by the window, a tall man in an expensive suit, his face hard and handsome and completely devoid of warmth. Miss Obi, he greeted her. "You've done well so far. The account information is valuable. But we're moving to the final phase now." "What final phase?" Adanma asked, though she dreaded the answer. Nonso pulled a small vial from his jacket pocket. The liquid inside was clear, innocuous looking. "This is a specially formulated toxin, tasteless, odorless. It causes gradual organ failure that mimics natural causes. After your wedding, you'll administer it to Chima over the course of 6 months. Small doses in his food or drink. By the time he dies, you'll be his legal widow, heir to his entire fortune." Adanma felt the room spin. "You want me to murder him?" No, I agreed to help you steal, not to kill." "You agreed to do whatever I required," Nonso interrupted coldly. "And I require this. Your debt is 42 million naira. Chima Adabo is worth 12 billion. His death clears your debt and makes you wealthy beyond imagination. You can provide for your family forever. All it costs is one life. The life of a man who will never truly love you anyway." "He does love me," Adanma said, tears streaming down her face. "And I love him. I won't kill him. I can't." Nonso's expression didn't change. He pulled out his phone, played a video. Adanma watched in horror as the screen showed her younger brother, Chike, leaving his university dormitory. A black car pulled alongside him. 3 men got out. The implication was clear. "One phone call," Nonso said quietly. "That's all it takes. Your brother dies tonight. Or you take this vial and do what needs to be done. Your choice, Miss Obi." Again. Adanma took the vial with shaking hands. She wanted to die. She wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, "How do I know it works? How do I know you're not lying?" Nonso smiled. "Smart question. We'll do a test. There's a small-time business rival of Chima's, a man named Okonkwo, who's been causing problems. You'll attend a charity gala next week where he'll be present. You'll slip 3 drops into his champagne. If the toxin works as promised, he'll be hospitalized within 72 hours with mysterious symptoms. Consider it your training exercise." The gala was hell. Adanma moved through the crowd like a ghost, the vial burning in her clutch purse. She found Okonkwo by the bar, laughing loudly, completely unaware. When he turned to greet another guest, she dropped 3 clear drops into his champagne flute. Her hand was steady. Her soul was shattered. 72 hours later, the news reported that businessman Okonkwo had been rushed to hospital with acute kidney failure. Cause unknown. Prognosis uncertain. Adanma vomited for an hour straight. The poison was real. Nonso's plan was real. And she was now a murderer in training, preparing to kill the only man she'd ever truly loved. Back at the penthouse, she watched Chima navigate his blindness with heartbreaking courage. He smiled at her, thanked her for her patience, told her how lucky he was to have her by his side. And every word was a dagger, because Adanma knew the truth. She was the worst thing that had ever happened to him. She was his doom. And their wedding, scheduled for 6 weeks from now, would be the beginning of his end. Unless somehow, impossibly, she found a way to save them both. The Cathedral of Christ the King had never looked more beautiful. White roses cascaded from every pillar. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across 500 guests, dressed in their finest agbada and aso-ebi. Outside, Lagos's elite had arrived in convoys of luxury cars, their drivers clogging the streets of Victoria Island. Inside, a 50-piece orchestra played Pachelbel's canon as Adanma walked down the aisle in a Vera Wang gown that cost more than most people earned in a year. She looked breathtaking. She looked terrified. And Chima, standing at the altar in his custom 3-piece tuxedo and dark glasses, could see every emotion flickering across her face, even though everyone believed he couldn't see anything at all. The past 6 weeks had been revelatory. Chima had watched Adanma's guilt consume her. He'd watched her cry herself to sleep. He'd listened to her tortured phone conversations with Nonso, heard her beg for more time, plead for another way, and slowly, piece by piece, he'd assembled the truth. Adanma wasn't a willing traitor. She was a victim. A woman trapped between impossible choices. forced to betray him to save her family. The realization had changed everything. Chima's anger transformed into something more complex. He still felt betrayed, but he also felt compassion. And more importantly, he now knew the real enemy. Nonso Ekwueme, his business rival, a ruthless corporate shark who'd been trying to destroy Adabo Technologies for years. Nonso was the puppet master. Adanma was just another puppet. But there was still one piece missing. One question Chima couldn't answer. How did Nonso know so much about his internal security? How did he have access to information that only top executives possessed? Someone inside Adabo Technologies was feeding Nonso intelligence. Someone Chima trusted deeply. And today, at this wedding, he would expose everyone. Ifeanyi stood beside him as best man, looking concerned and supportive. "You okay, brother?" he whispered as Adanma approached. "Never better," Chima replied, his voice steady. The ceremony began. Father Okonkwo's voice boomed across the cathedral, speaking of love and trust and sacred bonds. Adanma's hands shook as she held Chima's. Her voice cracked when she recited her vows. Chima felt her suffering like a physical thing. When it was his turn to speak, he improvised. "Adanma," he said, his voice carrying across the silent cathedral, "I promise to see you, truly see you, not just with my eyes, but with my heart, to understand the burdens you carry, the impossible choices you've faced, and to offer you something you haven't had in a long time: freedom." Adanma's eyes widened. Confusion flickered across her face. In the third row, Nonso Ekwueme sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Beside Chima, Ifeanyi shifted uncomfortably. Father Okonkwo cleared his throat. "If anyone has objections to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." Chima smiled. "Actually, Father, I have an objection." The cathedral erupted in confused murmurs. Adanma gasped. "Chima, what?" "I object," Chima continued, his voice growing stronger, "to the lies that have brought us to this moment. I object to the manipulation, the coercion, the betrayal." He reached up slowly and removed his dark glasses. His eyes swept across the crowd, clear and focused, and absolutely capable of sight. "And I object to pretending I'm blind when I can see everything." The cathedral exploded. Guests jumped to their feet. Adanma stumbled backward, her face draining of color. Nonso Ekwueme rose from his seat, calculating his exit. But Chima had prepared for this. Security personnel materialized at every door, blocking the exits. On the massive screens installed for the ceremony, video footage began playing. Adanma photographing documents. Nonso handing her the poison vial. Audio recordings of their conversations, crystal clear. "Nonso Ekwueme," Chima's voice rang out like judgment. "You blackmailed my fiancée by threatening her family. You forced her to spy on me. You gave her poison and ordered her to kill me. And you've been systematically trying to destroy my company for 3 years." He turned to Adanma, his expression softening. "But what you didn't know is that Adanma came to me 2 weeks ago. She confessed everything. She chose love over fear. And together, we've been feeding you false information ever since." It was a lie, a beautiful, merciful lie. Adanma hadn't confessed, but Chima was giving her an exit, a way to salvage her dignity, a chance at redemption. Tears streamed down her face as she realized what he was doing. Nonso's mask finally cracked. "You self-righteous fool," he snarled. "You think you've won? You think you're so clever? You have no idea how deep this goes. Your precious company has been compromised for years. Your most trusted people are right here." Ifeanyi interrupted suddenly. He stepped forward, his phone in his hand. "Chima, I need to show you something. Evidence I've been gathering. Proof of everyone involved in..." He never finished the sentence, because in that moment, on the cathedral screens, new footage appeared. Footage Chima had saved for last. Footage of Ifeanyi in Nonso's office. Ifeanyi receiving wire transfers. Ifeanyi providing security codes, executive schedules, confidential financial reports. Ifeanyi and Nonso laughing together, drinking together, planning together. The cathedral fell absolutely silent. Ifeanyi's face went white. His phone clattered to the marble floor. Chima, no, that's not. I can explain. Explain what? Chima's voice was barely a whisper now, all the emotion draining out of him. Explain how my best friend, my brother, the man I trusted more than anyone in this world, has been selling me out for 3 years? Explain how you've been Nonso's true partner while pretending to help me catch a traitor you knew didn't exist? Ifeanyi's face twisted. Something dark and desperate flashed in his eyes. He lunged suddenly, not at Chima, but at the laptop controlling the screens. If he could destroy the evidence, erase the footage. But Chima's security was faster. They tackled Ifeanyi before he reached the computer, and in his desperation, Ifeanyi made his final mistake. He screamed the truth. You never appreciated me. Never saw my value. I built that company as much as you did, but you got all the credit, all the money, all the glory. Nonso offered me what you never would. Partnership, equality, respect. Chima felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart, something deeper. The foundation of his entire world. I would have given you anything, he said quietly. All you had to do was ask, but you chose betrayal instead. You chose him. Police circled into the cathedral. EFCC officers, called in advance, moved efficiently. They arrested Nonso first, reading charges of extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, and corporate espionage. Then they took Ifeanyi, adding embezzlement and fraud to the list. Finally, they approached Adanma. Wait, Chima said. He turned to her. This woman who had almost murdered him. This woman who had betrayed him. This woman who had suffered in silence to protect her family. Adanma Obi acted under extreme duress. She's a victim, not a criminal, and I'm not pressing charges. The lead officer frowned. Sir, she admitted on tape too. I'm not pressing charges, Chima repeated firmly. Let her go. Adanma collapsed, sobbing, not tears of relief, tears of grief, because she understood what Chima had just done. He'd saved her life, but ended their love. They could never be together after this. Too much damage, too much pain. But he'd given her freedom, the one thing Nonso had stolen. As the police led Nonso and Ifeanyi away in handcuffs, Chima stood alone at the altar, surrounded by 500 witnesses, to his greatest triumph and his deepest loss. The penthouse felt different now, empty in ways that had nothing to do with space. Chima stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos Island, watching the city lights flicker in the evening haze. 3 months had passed since the wedding that never was. 3 months since his world had imploded in front of 500 witnesses. 3 months since he learned that trust was the most expensive thing a man could give away. The legal proceedings had been swift and brutal. Nonso Kweme received 15 years for extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, and corporate espionage. The evidence was overwhelming. The poison vial, the recorded conversations, the financial trails showing years of systematic theft. Nonso's empire crumbled within weeks. His assets were seized, his reputation destroyed. Justice, when it finally came, was thorough. Ifeanyi's betrayal cut deeper, so the satisfaction of his conviction felt hollow. 12 years for embezzlement, fraud, and corporate espionage. Ifeanyi had stolen over 200 million naira across 3 years, funneling money through shell companies he and Nonso had established. The man Chima had called brother. The man who'd stood beside him through university, through his father's death, through every triumph and failure. All of it had been a performance, a long con, executed with patience and precision. The worst part wasn't the money. Chima could rebuild financial losses. The worst part was the memories. Every laugh they'd shared was now tainted. Every moment of brotherhood now felt like mockery. Ifeanyi had looked him in the eye for 3 years while systematically dismantling everything Chima had built. That kind of betrayal didn't just break trust. It shattered your ability to believe in human goodness. Adanma had disappeared. Chima had kept his word and refused to press charges. The prosecutors had wanted to pursue her anyway, but without Chima's cooperation, their case was weak. She'd acted under duress. Her family's lives had been genuinely threatened. Any decent lawyer could argue coercion, so they let her go. Chima heard through mutual friends that she'd left Lagos entirely, moved back to her village in Enugu with her mother and brother. The debt that had enslaved her was paid from Nonso's seized assets. She was finally free. But freedom, Chima imagined, probably felt a lot like exile. He didn't hate her. That was the strange part. He'd had 3 months to process everything, and hatred never came. Adanma had been trapped in an impossible situation. She'd made terrible choices, yes, but they were choices made under the threat of watching her family die. Chima understood desperation. He understood the things people did when backed into corners. What he couldn't understand was Ifeanyi, because Ifeanyi had faced no threats, no coercion, just greed and resentment dressed up as ambition. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Chima turned from the window, frowning. He wasn't expecting anyone. His social circle had shrunk considerably. People didn't know how to act around him anymore. They treated him like he was fragile, broken, a man to be pitied rather than respected. So Chima had withdrawn, focusing on rebuilding his company, working 18-hour days to fill the silence. He opened the door to find a woman standing in the hallway, mid-20s, beautiful in an understated way, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a leather bag. Her face was familiar, though it took Chima a moment to place her. Then, recognition hit like a punch to the gut. "Chioma," he said quietly. "Hello, Chima," she replied, Ifeanyi's younger sister. The resemblance was there in her eyes, her cheekbones. But where Ifeanyi's face had always carried a calculated charm, Chioma's held only genuine warmth. "May I come in?" Chima hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered slowly, looking around the penthouse with sad eyes. "I almost didn't come," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see anyone with my last name." "What do you want, Chioma?" Chima's voice came out harder than intended. She turned to face him, and he saw tears gathering in her eyes. "I want to apologize. I know it's not my place. I know I didn't do anything wrong. But he's my brother, and I'm so sorry for what he did to you. I'm sorry for the pain, the betrayal. I'm sorry you lost your best friend, and I'm sorry I lost my brother, because the man who did those things isn't someone I recognize anymore." Chima felt something crack in his chest. In 3 months, no one had apologized. Not really. People had offered sympathy, pity, carefully worded condolences. But no one had simply said sorry for the pain itself. "You don't need to apologize for him," Chima said, his voice softening. "Maybe not," Chioma agreed, "but I needed to say it anyway." She reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of letters, bound with string. "These are from Ifeanyi, from prison. He's been writing to me, trying to explain, trying to justify what he did. I thought you might want to read them. Not for closure. I don't think there's closure for something like this. But maybe for understanding." Chima took the letters, feeling their weight. "Have you read them?" "Yes," Chioma said. "They're full of excuses and self-pity and resentment. But there's also regret, real regret. Not that it changes anything. Not that it makes what he did forgivable. But he's suffering now, if that matters." "It doesn't," Chima said. Then, more honestly, "I don't know if it does." Chioma nodded. "I understand. I should go. I just wanted you to have those, and to tell you something else." She paused, gathering courage. "I work in corporate law now. I've been following your company's recovery. What you've done in 3 months is remarkable. Rebuilding trust with clients, restructuring security, implementing new oversight protocols. You turned a disaster into an opportunity for genuine reform. That takes incredible strength." Chima looked at her properly for the first time. Really looked. He saw intelligence in her eyes, kindness, resilience. She carried her brother's betrayal too, in different ways. The shame of being related to a criminal, the loss of family reputation. Yet here she stood, professional and composed, offering compassion to the man her brother had destroyed. "Thank you," he said. "Would you like some coffee?" She smiled, small, tentative. "I'd like that." They talked for 3 hours. about law and business and Lagos and everything except Ifeanyi. Chima was funny, sharp, passionate about corporate ethics reform. She'd been working pro bono, helping small businesses protect themselves from exactly the kind of predatory practices Nonso had employed. She understood betrayal from multiple angles. And unlike everyone else in Chima's life, she didn't treat him like he was damaged. When she finally left, Chima stood by the window again, but the penthouse felt less empty. He wasn't ready for love, might not be ready for years. Trust was a muscle he'd have to rebuild slowly, carefully. But Chima had reminded him of something crucial. Not everyone betrays, not everyone lies. Some people, even when carrying their own pain, still show up with kindness and honesty and genuine care. 6 months later, Chima and Chima were working together on a corporate ethics initiative. 9 months later, they were dating. A year later, standing in a much smaller, more intimate venue with only 50 guests, Chima married Chima Okafor in a ceremony built on foundation of complete, hard-won honesty. This time, he didn't need to fake blindness to see the truth. This time, the woman at the altar loved him without conditions, without coercion, without hidden agendas. She knew every scar on his soul and loved him anyway. And Chima, who had lost his faith in human goodness, found it again in the sister of the man who'd tried to destroy him. Because that's how life works sometimes. Your greatest betrayal and your greatest blessing can come from the same family. Your deepest wound and your truest healing can share the same last name. And the love you thought you'd lost forever can find you again, when you least expect it, in the most impossible place. If you were Chima, will you have anything to do with your enemy's sister? Don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tell us what you think in the comments below.